It was the third time she showed up to our Tuesday night therapy session without her wedding ring, and I noticed, but I didn't flinch. I smiled, just enough to look like I didn't care, and watched her fiddle with her phone under the couch pillow like a junkie sneaking a hit. Our therapist, Greg, asked her a softball about communication, and she launched into a polished little monologue about how hard it was to connect emotionally with someone who just bottles everything up. As if I were some emotionally constipated accountant instead of the man who paid off her student loans. What really got me, though, what triggered the first crack in my calm, wasn't the missing ring, or the subtle eye rolls, or even the secret of texting. It was the perfume. My mother's perfume. The exact same floral scent I'd wrapped up with her gifts last Christmas and buried in the back of her unused dresser drawer, because she hated it. She once said it smelled like old regrets in funeral homes. And now she was wearing it to therapy. So, I sat there across from her, soaking in the irony like cheap cologne. She didn't even notice. She probably thought I was lost in thought, shut down, as usual, but what I was actually doing was watching the story unravel. See, I'd replaced the therapist 3 weeks ago. Greg isn't licensed. He isn't even in psychology. He's a friend from college with a theater degree and a knack for improv who agreed to sit in, smile, nod, and take notes. I even gave him a script to follow. So far, she hadn't caught on. She thought these sessions were her safe zone, her little confessional booth where she could manipulate the narrative and spin me into the villain. But tonight was different. She didn't just wear the perfume. She strutted in with it like it was armor, like it made her bold. And when she crossed her legs, I noticed the faintest red mark on her inner thigh, just below the hem of her skirt, half a fingerprint, the kind you don't get from walking into doors or shaving too fast. I locked eyes with her, and I know she saw it, the moment I saw it. But I smiled anyway. A full, calm, too-wide grin that probably unsettled her more than any accusation could. And when she asked Greg if she could have a private session next time, just her, just to process things without pressure, Greg paused, looked at me, and then gave the most deliciously awkward, fake therapist response ever, of course. Confidentiality is key to healing, after all. That was the moment she stepped in it. She didn't even hesitate to betray me when she thought I wouldn't hear. The fact that she wore the perfume I bought for my dead mother to that session, that was a psychological twist I didn't see coming. Almost poetic. The sin of mourning mixed with deceit. And she leaned into it, leaned all the way in. Because 2 days later, when I told her I was working late and she could go to therapy solo, she practically skipped out the door. She even whistled. Whistled. Like she was off to something exciting, something forbidden. I watched her from the window as she drove away, that same damn perfume trailing behind her like a flag. She didn't know I was parked in the alley outside Greg's office with a thermal camera and a listening device rigged to the air vent. It wasn't paranoia. It was research. The moment of truth came faster than I expected. Within 10 minutes of sitting down, she was laughing, flirt laughing, the kind that's a little too breathy. She told Greg she hadn't felt this hurt in years, and I swear to God, she put her hand on his knee. I heard the rustle of movement, the sound of fabric shifting, and then her voice dropped to a whisper. He's weak. He's comfortable. He doesn't challenge me anymore. I stay because the house is in his name, and if I leave without cause, I get nothing. Those words didn't even sting. They confirmed what I'd suspected for months, what I'd known. But hearing it from her mouth, hearing her weaponize the very trust one built, ignited something cold and precise in me. I wasn't angry. I was calculating, measured, ready, because I'd already rewritten the prenup, already had the notary visit the office and switch the copies. The one she signed last week while helping me organize paperwork wasn't a joint tax agreement. It was a revision that stripped her of any marital claims due to infidelity. And all I had to do now was wait for her to brag just a little more, to sink just a little deeper. She didn't know Greg was wearing a mic, didn't know the room was bugged, didn't know the little red fingerprint on her thigh was timestamped in HD. And when she finally leaned in and whispered, I could see myself with someone like you, Greg. Someone who listens, he simply asked. Would you say you've emotionally checked out of your marriage? She answered without thinking. I checked out a long time ago. I'm just playing the game. Well, sweetheart, the game's almost over. And you're about to find out who's really been playing who. In the beginning, it was beautiful. The kind of quiet, reliable life most people would envy, shared coffee in the mornings, inside jokes only we understood, Sunday grocery runs that somehow felt like dates. She'd curl into me on the couch during movie nights, whisper stupid little things like, "You're my home," and I believed her. God help me, I did. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't chasing dreams anymore. I had what I wanted, a wife I loved, a house I paid for, and a stable job that didn't kill me. So when she started changing, it didn't happen like a car crash. It was more like a slow leak. The kind that doesn't wake you up, just leaves you stranded miles from where you thought you were going. It started with the gym. Harmless enough, right? She said she wanted to feel stronger, more in control of her body. I encouraged her. Even bought her a new set of workout clothes and one of those smart watches that tracks your progress. But then she started going 5 days a week, sometimes twice a day. Suddenly, she was too tired at night. Not in a cold way, more like she was just elsewhere, mentally and physically. Always sore, always processing. She stopped asking how my day was. Stopped reacting when I told her good news. I got a promotion at work, and she blinked at me like I told her the toaster was broken. No smile, no kiss, just a distracted nod and something about needing to journal later. Then came the books. Self-help garbage with titles like Finding You Again and The Boundary Blueprint. She started quoting them in conversation, things like, "I've realized I've been shrinking myself in this relationship," or, "Just because you love someone doesn't mean they're your forever person." And she'd say it so calmly, as if she were talking about furniture arrangements, not the foundation of our marriage. At first, I chalked it up to growing pains. Everyone evolves, right? Maybe she just needed room to figure herself out. I gave her that space. I stopped asking when she came home late from her walking meditations. I didn't mention how she started putting a passcode on her phone after 5 years of open screens and shared playlists. Even when I saw a Venmo transaction labeled, "Thanks for the escape," from someone I didn't recognize, I just stared at it until the screen dimmed. I wanted to believe. I needed to believe. Then there was the shift in her wardrobe. Not flashy, but deliberate, new cuts, sharper lines, more cleavage, fewer bras. She said she was reclaiming her femininity. I told her she looked incredible, and she gave me a thank you like I was a stranger at a party complimenting her shoes. She started keeping a second bag in the trunk of her car, just in case, she said, though I never asked in case of what. Sometimes I'd go into the garage and find the car parked differently, the seat pushed back too far for her frame. I convinced myself the mechanic must have done it during her oil change. I even looked up the name on the invoice, some guy named Derek, but it didn't make me feel better. Just made the pit in my stomach settle in deeper. The real turning point was the birthday weekend. Mine. She forgot to make plans. Claimed work was crazy and asked if we could postpone the celebration. But that Saturday, she came home late wearing heels and smelling like she'd bathed in someone else's cologne. She laughed it off, said her coworker sprayed her as a joke. And I smiled. I smiled. Because it was easier than letting the rage take over. A week later, I found a new contact in her phone saved under Beth Yoga. I called it when she was in the shower. A man answered. Deep voice. Confused. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but I still didn't confront her. Not yet. I told myself maybe it was just a shared line. Maybe Beth had a husband. I didn't want to see what was in front of me. Because once I did, it couldn't be undone. Then she made her Instagram private. Told me she was tired of being perceived. I didn't say a word. Just nodded and retreated further into the routine. Still cooked dinner. Still cleaned the house. Still asked if she needed anything when I went to the store. She smiled sometimes, but it was a courtesy, like the kind you give a waiter, not a husband. And that smile? It didn't reach her eyes. It was all teeth. All mask. Her phone never left her side anymore. Not even in the bathroom. She used to sing in the shower, now there was only silence. She stopped wearing her wedding ring at home, too. Said it slowed her down at the gym. And then one night, I caught her staring at herself in the mirror for too long, touching her collarbone like it was unfamiliar territory. I asked if she was okay. She said, "I'm not sure who I am anymore." But the way she said it, she didn't sound lost. She sounded free. So I kept quiet. Pretended nothing was happening. Let her reinvent herself right in front of me, even as she carved me out of the story. Because some betrayals aren't loud. They don't come with shouting or slammed doors. Some betrayals sound like personal growth and self-care. And I watched her bloom, beautifully, painfully, into someone who didn't have space for me anymore. It was a Thursday night when the last illusion finally cracked. And I mean really cracked, like a bone snapping under too much pressure. She was in the kitchen humming some indie song she used to hate, chopping cucumbers for a salad she wouldn't eat, because lately she never ate with me, always claiming she had already grabbed something or was fasting for clarity. I was in the living room, pretending to scroll through emails while watching her reflection in the darkened screen of the TV. The scene was normal, domestic, even, until her smartwatch buzzed. She glanced at it and her entire posture changed. Shoulders lifted. A smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. She didn't think I saw it. She thought I was too checked out to notice these things anymore. She tapped the screen, turned her back to me, and kept humming. That's when I got up and casually walked over to grab a glass of water from the counter. Nothing dramatic. Just movement. I made sure I passed behind her, close enough to glance over her shoulder without being obvious. The message was still on her screen. A small, glowing rectangle of treason. You wore that perfume again today. You trying to kill me, or what? Signed with a single red devil emoji. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. But the way her finger shot to the screen to clear the notification too fast, too guilty, it told me everything. I didn't speak. Didn't flinch. I poured my water like I hadn't seen a damn thing. But inside, something shifted. Something fundamental. The final chord snapped and all the noise went silent. My heart didn't race. It slowed. My mind didn't spiral. It sharpened. I stared into the glass of water and saw the ripple from the faucet settle. Just like me. Calm. Flat. Deadly. She turned to say something about watching a movie later, her voice laced with the same syrupy indifference she'd been feeding me for weeks. I nodded. Maybe even smiled. I can't remember. My ears were ringing from the sheer clarity of that moment. That text, it wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a bullet hole already in my chest. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I realized then how long she'd been laughing at me behind my back. This wasn't an emotional affair. It wasn't confusion or boundaries or soul-searching. It was deliberate. Strategic. She'd weaponized intimacy, played the victim in therapy, curated distance, and now she was wearing my dead mother's perfume for him. Whoever he was. I cleaned my glass and returned it to the rack with surgical precision. Every action, every breath, now felt like part of a larger algorithm, one I was already calculating. I needed data. I needed patterns. I needed leverage. Because this wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about dominance. About not letting her walk away feeling empowered by her betrayal. I watched her from the hallway that night as she got ready for bed, brushing her hair longer than usual, checking her face in the mirror like she was prepping for someone else's gaze. She climbed into bed and turned her back to me, just like always now. But I didn't feel hurt. I felt ready. I stared at the back of her head and imagined a war map. Every whisper, every scent, every lie, plotted like coordinates. The next morning, I told her I was going out of town for a work retreat. Just 3 days, nothing major. She smiled without looking up from her phone and said, "Have fun." That was her last mistake. Because while I was gone, I was right here, orchestrating everything. I was setting the trap. And when it sprung, it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be messy. It would be surgical, clinical, absolute. Because now I had what I needed, undeniable proof, and a reason. And when a man like me finally moves from suspicion to certainty, he doesn't cry. He plans. The moment I knew, truly knew, that I wasn't dealing with a crisis of the heart but a calculated betrayal, I stopped being a husband and became a machine. I moved through the house like a ghost, documenting everything, her routines, her moods, the shift in her language. She'd started saying things like, "You don't need to worry about that," and "Why are you asking?" Phrases that served one purpose, deflection. So I gave her less to deflect. I became agreeable, almost passive. I played dumb. I smiled when she lied. I nodded when she canceled dinner plans for her solo yoga nights, and I offered to cover for her when she said she had to stay late at work. And while she vanished behind vague excuses and low-lit phone screens, I started digging. Not obsessively. Methodically. First, I told her I needed to rebalance our budget after that new promotion. She said, "Sure, go for it." She'd always let me handle the finances. Big mistake. I scoured every line of our bank statements, color-coded the charges, flagged the ones that didn't match her stories. 3 charges a week at a juice bar across town she'd never mentioned. Uber trips ending 2 blocks away from where she said she was going. A recurring $150 charge labeled Touchstone Services that turned out to be a boutique motel with rooms available by the hour. That one hit me in the gut, but I didn't flinch. I screenshotted the receipts, stored them in a locked folder on a drive only I could access, and kept going. Next came the location tests. I told her I was stuck at work one evening and asked her to bring me my laptop, left by accident on the dining table. She said she couldn't, claimed she was already across town at a wellness workshop. But when I pinged the laptop's location from my phone, it showed her car parked just 2 blocks away, not at any workshop, but at the same street as that damn juice bar. I didn't call her out. I thanked her for the effort, said I'd manage without it, and watched the map update in real time as she lingered in that area for another hour. No workshop ends at 8:47 p.m. And then there was the Instagram story. Not hers, her best friend's. She forgot that tagging someone means you can be seen, even if your profile's private. I watched her blurry silhouette clink glasses with a man I didn't recognize, the caption reading, "Hot girl dinner vibes fire clinking glasses." Her best friend tried to pan away quickly, but I caught the way she leaned into him. Too close. Too familiar. I never asked her how the book club went that night. I just stored the video and smiled at her like nothing had changed. I also planted questions, subtle and barbed. One night, I mentioned a fictional coworker named Jason, said he and I were heading to a conference next month in Tampa. I watched her eyebrows twitch. She asked if she could join me, just for the getaway. And when I said Jason's wife was also coming, she dropped the idea immediately. That told me 2 things. She wasn't worried about the trip, she was worried about the company. Another night, I said I was thinking of switching gyms, that mine was getting too crowded. She practically panicked. Asked why, what gym, what time. I never said where I planned to switch, but when I checked later that week, she'd changed her own gym schedule to avoid mornings entirely, where I claimed I might start going. It was a small thing, a tactical shuffle, but it confirmed her fear, proximity. She didn't want to bump into me where she wasn't supposed to be. Then I got clever. I contacted an old college friend who works in IT and asked him to help me set up a test. Just a basic phishing scam sent to her email from a fake yoga retreat company. The email promised a free couple's spiritual getaway with luxury amenities. I wanted to see what she'd do. She opened the email in under 2 minutes, clicked the link, and filled out the form using her real name, but not mine. She entered a man named Leo as her +1. I didn't recognize the name, but I would. I traced the email account she'd listed for Leo, ran a reverse search, and landed on a work profile at a tech startup downtown. The guy was younger, single, definitely not a yoga instructor. I printed his photo, kept it in my desk drawer. A reminder, not of her, but of who I was becoming. She still had no clue. Still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still called me babe in front of friends. Still played the part. But I was already 10 steps ahead, watching from the shadows of her life. I started recording our shared phone calls through my Bluetooth car system. I installed a discrete camera in the living room clock. I set up a dummy account on social media and followed her best friend just to see what slipped through. And slowly, piece by piece, the mask fell. Not because she dropped it, but because I'd already peeled it off. She thought she was navigating a maze I couldn't see. She didn't realize I'd built the damn thing around her. She was already caught. She just didn't know it yet. The room was wrapped in the hum of polite conversation, champagne glasses clinking, and the occasional burst of laughter. The annual holiday party for her firm, hosted in a rooftop venue that overlooked the entire city. She had invited me 2 weeks in advance, even laid out my suit for me that morning with a soft kiss on the cheek, like we were still that couple, stable, supportive, loyal. I played along. Let her drape herself over me for photos, introduce me to partners I'd never met, compliment my tie like it was the first time she'd seen it. But I wasn't here for handshakes or catered lamb chops. I was here because I knew Leo would be here too. I'd seen the email. He was listed as a new vendor for one of her firm's tech rollouts. She'd mentioned the partnership in passing like it was nothing, just business, and I almost laughed at how perfectly stupid her mistake was. She'd invited me to the stage where she was about to burn. The moment came during a speech, her speech, because of course, she had one. She'd been promoted recently, recognized for her growth and leadership. I stood at the back of the room while she took the mic, poised and polished, thanking the team and her mentors, locking eyes with different colleagues. But not with me. Never once with me. And then the projector behind her flickered to life, meant to display her professional accolades, a little highlight reel. But instead, it showed something else. A still image of her on a hotel balcony, hair down, head tilted back in laughter, a glass of wine in one hand, and Leo's lips pressed to her neck. The photo stayed on the screen for 5 seconds. Maybe less. But it was long enough. Long enough for the entire room to inhale at once. Long enough for her to stop breathing. Then, without saying a word, The screen went black. I stepped forward through the silence, as if I were walking into a funeral, and stood just beneath the platform. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her first instinct was reflex. "It's not what you think," she said, almost too quickly. I didn't respond. I just watched her. That was the part that unnerved her, the silence. The room still hadn't resumed breathing. We were talking, that's all. "That picture, it looks bad. I know," but she stumbled. She knew. Everyone knew. It was a mistake. A stupid one. We were drunk. It meant nothing. Her voice cracked. The composure she wore like armor was already fraying. Then came the pivot. "You never saw me. You were always in your own world. Work. Routine. You didn't care how lonely I felt." The audience was shrinking away now, pretending not to listen while hearing every word. "You made me feel invisible," she hissed. "I needed someone to make me feel real again." Still, I said nothing. I let her words hang in the air like a confession under oath. That's when her eyes narrowed. "You planned this," she whispered, venom lacing the edges of her voice. "You sick bastard. You set me up." I tilted my head slightly, just a fraction, like I was considering it. Her breath hitched. "You knew. This whole time, you knew." What kind of man just watches it happen? The kind who finishes the game after the opponent has already lost. That's when she laughed, a bitter, hollow thing, and tried to salvage some ground. "You think this makes you look strong? Like some kind of mastermind? You're pathetic. You needed to publicly humiliate me to feel like a man." Her voice was louder now, trying to regain control, to flip the narrative before it drowned her. "Go ahead," she snapped. "Tell everyone I'm the villain. Paint yourself as the poor, betrayed husband. But you and I both know you were never really here. Not where it mattered." I stepped up onto the stage then, finally, but only to lean in close enough that no one else could hear what I said. I looked her dead in the eye and spoke quietly, clearly. "You gave him my dead mother's perfume." Her face broke, just for a second. "That's not reclaiming yourself. That's erasing everything we built. You didn't want freedom. You wanted applause while burning the house down." Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. The fury drained from her. What was left was something far colder. Fear. Not the kind that comes from danger, but from realization. The understanding that she hadn't just lost her lie, she'd lost the illusion of being in control. I turned to step down from the stage, and she reached for my arm, an instinct, a habit, but I didn't stop. I didn't yank away. I just kept walking. And that, more than anything, shattered her. Because I wasn't storming off in rage. I wasn't begging for answers. I was done listening, done participating. She called my name once. Softly. No one responded. Not even me. The room stayed thick with discomfort, conversations failing to restart, eyes darting to phones and drinks and shoes, anywhere but at her. I didn't leave. Not yet. I stood near the exit, watching her try to pretend like she still had some footing left, that the night could somehow be salvaged. But the cracks were showing. In her voice. In her hands. In the way she kept blinking too fast, like if she did it hard enough, this would all turn into a dream she could wake from. She looked for me in the crowd. She didn't find pity. She didn't find understanding. And she definitely didn't find me. She followed me home that night, of course. Not immediately, not with grace, but eventually, after she'd spent 30 minutes pacing that rooftop venue like a marionette with cut strings, fake laughing when anyone got too close, pretending not to notice the way people peeled away from her like she was contagious. By the time she walked through our front door, her heels were in her hand, and her voice was already trembling with a bitterness that had nothing to do with the cold. "You humiliated me," she snapped, slamming the door behind her like it could rewind time. I didn't answer. I was seated on the couch, jacket still on, scrolling through my phone, not because I was distracted, but because I knew ignoring her would peel her skin back faster than any insult. She kicked off her shoes and stormed across the room, standing directly in front of me like proximity could still command respect. "You set me up," she hissed, teeth clenched, mascara smudged. "You think that makes you clever? You think anyone's going to side with you after that little stunt?" I looked up at her for exactly 1 second, long enough to say, "They don't have to." Her jaw twitched. She was expecting a fight, a scream, some desperate cry for an explanation. She was still pretending I wanted one. "You smothered me," she said, pacing now, hands flailing with practiced theatrics. "You made this house feel like a cage. Every time I tried to grow, you pulled me back like some needy little." I raised my eyes slowly. "You cheated in that cage. Must not have been too tight." That stopped her, only for a heartbeat, but enough. The flicker of guilt, or maybe rage, Or maybe the realization that I wasn't going to give her anything soft to push against. You were boring, she spat, voice louder now. Predictable. You never changed. You never challenged me. I needed someone who made me feel alive, not safe. I stood up then, not fast, just enough to meet her eye-to-eye. You mean someone who didn't know you well enough to see through you? Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped past her and poured myself a drink. She didn't follow at first. She stood frozen, arms shaking, chest heaving like she was building toward a climax she couldn't quite deliver. This wouldn't have happened, she said, each word sharper than the last, if you were a real man. I took a slow sip, let the silence stretch until it hummed in her ears, then met her eyes and said, a real man wouldn't need to set a trap. A real man would have known you weren't worth catching. That one cracked something deep. She flinched like I'd slapped her, and for a second, I thought she might actually cry. But no, she switched tactics again, faster now, like a drowning woman clawing at anything that floats. I was lonely, she whispered, voice suddenly small, broken. I didn't know how to say it. You stopped seeing me. I nodded, slow and deliberate. No. I stopped believing in what I saw. Tears welled up then. Real or not, I didn't care. She stepped forward, tried to touch my hand, and I pulled back so smoothly it was like muscle memory. Her breath caught. Don't do this, she said, now pleading. Please. Don't throw everything away. I looked around the room, the living room she redecorated during her self-discovery phase, the art on the wall she claimed expressed her soul, the yoga mat still curled up by the window like a joke. Then I looked at her. You already threw it away. I'm just taking out the trash. That did it. The mask dropped. The crying stopped. Her eyes went black, mouth twisting into something hateful. You think you're better than me? She snapped. You think being cold and smug makes you righteous? I shrugged. No. It just makes me done. She began pacing again, cursing under her breath, eyes wild, like if she moved fast enough, she could escape the reality folding in on her. You can't just walk away from me, she said. You need me. I laughed. Just once. Low. Final. I needed who you pretended to be. Not this. And then she broke, fully, finally. The anger dissolved into something hollow, desperate. What do you want? She asked, voice cracking. An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay? I messed up. I was stupid. I held up a hand, and she went silent like a dog trained to a signal. I don't want anything from you, I said. That's the difference now. You're not someone I'm trying to fix or love or save. You're just finished. The words echoed. She backed away slowly, like each step was against her will. She didn't speak again, didn't beg, just stared at me, as if trying to find some flicker of the man who used to chase her shadow. But I wasn't there anymore, and that terrified her more than any scream ever could. I sat back down, took another sip of my drink, and let the silence stretch like a noose. She stood in the doorway, trembling, suspended in a moment she couldn't manipulate. And I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Let her stew in the realization that nothing she said could touch me now. The morning after the rooftop exposure, she acted like the world hadn't caved in. She brewed coffee in the kitchen like nothing had happened, hummed a song I knew she hadn't listened to in years, probably an echo of some old comfort she was trying to cling to. She wore a hoodie and no makeup, the same reset look she used after fights, trying to bait me into starting a conversation, testing if she could talk her way out of the noose I'd left hanging in the air. I didn't bite. I let her keep thinking she had time, that she still had room to maneuver, because that illusion was the most powerful part of my plan. What she didn't know was that my silence wasn't passive, it was preparation. I'd already laid the foundation long before that projector lit up the truth. I'd been archiving every text, every financial inconsistency, every GPS ping. The burner phone she used for her side piece? I cloned it weeks ago with a SIM skimmer and had it mirrored to a private cloud server. Every sweet nothing she thought she whispered to Leo was now part of a neatly organized digital folder, timestamped and backed up in triplicate. I didn't even need to break into her phone. She'd given me everything through negligence. A shared cloud, a synced laptop, an old password she never thought to change. She left a trail like breadcrumbs, and I followed it straight to her destruction. First, I quietly separated the accounts. She didn't notice at first, because I didn't touch the obvious ones. I left our shared checking alone but siphoned off the savings into a trust account under my name only. I froze the investment portfolio she never checked, the one tied to my old brokerage account, and transferred the car title back to me, using the original purchase agreement she'd never bothered to review. The lease on her so-called creative studio downtown? I paid the landlord a visit, showed him the infidelity clause in our marital agreement, and terminated the co-signature effective immediately. She came home 2 days later ranting about how the key card didn't work anymore. I smiled, offered to call building security for her. She declined. Still thought she was in control. Then I moved on to her professional life. I wasn't petty, I was strategic. She worked in a mid-sized firm where office image mattered, especially for someone in a client-facing role. I created a document, clean, bullet-pointed, emotionless, laying out the timeline of her affair, including screenshots, timestamps, and a link to the hotel receipt charged to our joint business card. I didn't send it to HR. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I sent it to one of the firm's senior partners, an old-school type who prided himself on discretion and professionalism. I addressed it anonymously, as a concerned associate, and let the virus do the rest. Within 48 hours, I overheard her on the phone, frantic, telling someone, "It's not like it affected my work." But the tone in her voice said otherwise. Something had cracked. I waited until the panic set in, then began phase 2. I called her parents. Calm. Direct. I told them the truth, not with malice, but with evidence. I sent them a carefully written email with an attached PDF of the compiled messages and photographs. I didn't editorialize. I didn't rant. I let her own words destroy the image they held of her. Her mother replied with a single line, "We had no idea. Thank you for telling us." Her father never responded. But 2 days later, she was crying in the bathroom, phone clutched to her chest like it had betrayed her too. I reclaimed the house without saying a word, started changing passwords, removed her from the alarm system, and updated the deed. She thought she had squatter's rights. She didn't realize that while she was off finding herself, I'd restructured our assets under my name in a revocable trust, legally airtight. By the time the divorce papers arrived, she was living in a rental she couldn't afford, with her credit card declined at a grocery store I used to shop for her in. I served her the divorce filing through a neutral third party, one of our mutual friends who'd once been her biggest fan. He didn't say a word when he handed her the envelope. Just looked at her like he didn't recognize her anymore. That hurt her more than anything. The silence. The judgment. The absence of defense. She tried to call me afterward, left 3 voicemails. The first was apologetic. The second was bitter. The third was just quiet sobbing and the sound of her lighter flicking over and over. I saved them, not out of sentimentality, just as evidence of the pattern, how quick she shifted, how hollow the remorse was when it wasn't accompanied by consequences. She still didn't know about the last piece. Leo. I never contacted him directly. I didn't need to. I uploaded a folder, her perfume-slicked messages, the balcony photos, the call log timestamps, and shared it with him through a fake Dropbox link sent from her own email, accessed through an unsecured session on our home Wi-Fi. He hasn't responded, but she hasn't mentioned his name since. I assume he's gone, just like everything else. She walks through her days now like a woman in a house of mirrors, watching versions of herself collapse in every direction, not sure which one was the real her. And I stay silent, not to avoid confrontation, but because revenge isn't about noise. It's about precision. It's about watching the person who thought they were untouchable slowly realize they were always standing in a minefield, one I built while smiling. It was her cousin's wedding, a sprawling outdoor affair at a private vineyard, the kind of event where appearances mattered more than blood, where dresses were rented, smiles were sculpted, and every conversation was a veiled transaction. She'd begged me to come, said we should present a united front, that her family was still adjusting to the divorce proceedings. I agreed, not because I wanted to make peace, but because I knew exactly what was waiting for her. Everyone was already there when we arrived, hundreds of guests sipping champagne under fairy lights, strings of laughter and music weaving through the air. She wore red. Bold choice. The kind of statement someone makes when they think they can rewrite the narrative by simply looking unbothered. Her smile was wide, but not warm. Her hand clutched my arm a little too tightly, as if proximity could protect her. She didn't know her cousin had seen the videos, that her aunt had read the emails, that her father, the one who hadn't replied to my message, had printed the receipts and passed them to every blood relative like a war crime dossier. I walked beside her as we made the rounds, letting her play the role of devoted wife one last time. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. No one embraced her. No one met her eyes. Her confident smile began to flicker. I watched the calculation start behind her eyes, trying to guess what they'd heard, what they knew, who had spoken. Then came the moment. The photographer called for a family photo. Everyone, he said. Whole family. We stepped forward. Or rather, I did. She tried to follow, but her sister stepped in front of her, blocking the path with a blank stare that said everything. No, her sister said. Just that. Nothing more. No drama. No explanation. Just a quiet rejection with the weight of centuries behind it. Her face froze, mouth half open. She turned to her mother, but the woman looked away, suddenly preoccupied with a non-existent smudge on her wine glass. Her father stood at the center of the group, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her like he was looking at a stranger who'd trespassed onto sacred land. Still, she tried to laugh it off, played it cute. Guess I'm the black sheep now, she said with a grin that cracked halfway through the sentence. No one laughed. Her voice, normally so commanding, sounded tinny in the open air. She turned to me then, eyes wide, desperate, and I just looked at her. Not with anger. Not with pity. Just looked. And that's when it hit her. That I wasn't going to step in. That I wasn't going to fix this. That I wasn't hers anymore. Not her protector, not her partner, not her shield. I was her witness. The groom's brother, who used to flirt with her at family events, raised his glass, not in a toast, but in mockery, and turned his back. One by one, they all followed. Her cousins, her uncles, even her childhood best friend, the one who used to giggle with her over summer wine nights, walked away without a word. She was surrounded by people she loved, and not one would meet her eyes. Her shoulders slumped slightly. She pulled out her phone like a shield, pretending to check messages that weren't there. Then the final nail dropped, her boss. He was there, too, mingling with the crowd, invited through some shared family connection. He saw her from across the lawn and made a point to turn the other direction. That moment broke her. Her breath hitched. She blinked too fast. Her fingers trembled on the screen. She tried to laugh again, but the sound died in her throat. She turned back to me, mouthing something, maybe a question, maybe a plea, but I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching as the carefully constructed world she built around lies and charm collapsed in real time. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, surgical, exquisite. She tried to regain control, marched over to her sister, demanded to know what was going on. Her sister handed her a small envelope. Inside were copies of the same screenshots I'd sent to her parents, the texts, the hotel bills, the balcony photo. She opened it and read, eyes darting faster, and then just stopped, like someone had unplugged her from the inside. She didn't say a word, didn't yell. Her jaw clenched, eyes glossed over, and she turned to me one last time, searching for something mercy, maybe, redemption. But all she found was my silence, my stillness. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just let her look at me, long enough for her to understand that this wasn't vengeance fueled by rage. This was justice carved from patience. She looked around, as if realizing for the first time that no one was going to save her, that there were no more lifelines, only wreckage. Her hands dropped to her sides. Her red dress suddenly looked too bright, too loud, like a scream in a cathedral. And I stayed. I stood there through all of it, through the sideways glances, the awkward excuses, the widening space around her. I stood there like a judge watching a sentence carried out. She knew, in that moment, that she hadn't just lost her reputation or her marriage. She'd lost me. The one person who had seen everything, held everything, believed in everything. And now, I was just a mirror reflecting back who she really was. That was the final cut. Not the exposure. Not the shame. But the knowledge that I saw her fall and chose not to catch her. It happened in the middle of her brother's engagement party, of all places, a country club garden event filled with white linen tables, clinking champagne flutes, and artificial smiles plastered onto people who thrived on pretending nothing bad ever happened in their curated lives. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Her family had made it clear after the wedding humiliation that I was persona non grata, but her brother invited me anyway, quietly, respectfully, saying, "I just want you to be seen. By the right people." So I came. I stayed quiet. I watched her flutter around in a powder blue dress, fake laughing with guests who no longer looked her in the eyes. She tried to pretend the collapse hadn't happened, that the ashes weren't still clinging to her heels. But all it took was one moment, one slip for the entire illusion to combust. Leo was there. She didn't know he would be. He came as a guest of a guest, not expecting her either, and when they locked eyes across the buffet table, the tension snapped so loud you could almost hear it. She froze. He turned and walked away. Fast. Like being in the same air as her might cost him his job, his image, his self-respect. And she panicked. She followed. I followed her. And so did her parents. And her best friend. And a few guests who'd heard the rumors but hadn't seen the blood yet. The confrontation exploded just outside the event tent, beneath the garden lights, where her whisper yell turned into a full-throated scream. Why are you following me? What do you want now to finish the show? I didn't answer. Her father stepped forward, tried to calm her, but she shoved his hand away. Oh, don't act like you're innocent, she snapped. You all want to act so shocked, like you haven't all done your dirt too. Someone gasped. Her mother looked like she might faint. She turned to me then, pointing like I was the match that lit this fire. You did this. You destroyed my life. Her voice was shaking now, not with sorrow, but with rage. You manipulated everyone into turning on me. You think that makes you a man? I laughed sharp, bitter, surgical. No, that makes me the mirror. You destroyed your own life. I just showed everyone what it looks like. She charged forward, finger jabbing toward my chest. You were never there. Never supported me. You made me feel like a stranger in my own house. Her voice cracked, high and thin. I didn't flinch. You made yourself a stranger when you chose secrets over truth. When you chose hotel rooms over home. The crowd was forming now. Her coworkers. My sister. Her cousin filming with a phone just behind her clutch purse. You're acting like you're some hero, she hissed. You're just bitter. You're broken. You're petty and pathetic. I stepped closer, voice low and sharp. No, you're pathetic. Because you gambled everything on a lie and thought no one would notice. Because you thought your charm would outlast the truth. Because you looked me in the eye, wearing my mother's perfume, and asked me to fight for you, while you were still wiping another man off your skin. She slapped me then. Full palm. Loud enough that someone audibly gasped. But I didn't move. Not a twitch. I looked her dead in the eye and said, that's the most honest thing you've done in months. She was shaking now, mascara smearing, hands fisting at her sides like she wanted to tear anything apart. You never loved me, she said, voice cracking again. You just loved the version of me that made you feel strong. I tilted my head. I loved the version of you that existed before the mask. Before you made loyalty feel like a burden. Before your love became a performance with a rotating cast. She spun around, desperate, shouting to the crowd, you're all just standing there? You really believe him? He's been playing victim since day one. Her mother stepped forward, soft but firm. Enough, sweetheart. No, she snapped. They need to hear it. They all need to hear what he put me through. We have heard, her best friend cut in, arms crossed, eyes cold. We heard you. We heard the recordings. We saw the messages. You don't get to cry foul now that the curtain's down. The crowd murmured. A few people stepped back, like standing too close might stain them. She turned to her father, whispering, please. Tell them it wasn't all my fault. But the man just shook his head, tired, ashamed. I raised a daughter who thought the truth was optional. You made your bed. She dropped to her knees, not gracefully, but like her spine gave out under the weight of exposure. Please, she whimpered. I'm sorry. I messed up. I know that. But I'm not a monster. I was just lost. I crouched down, met her eyes for one last time. Lost is when you take a wrong turn and try to get back. You built a house in someone else's bed and burned the map home. Her lips trembled. Her fingers clutched the grass like it could anchor her. But nothing could. Not now. I stood, adjusted my cufflinks, and turned away. She called my name twice. First with hope, then with panic. But I didn't look back. I walked through the stunned crowd like smoke from a finished fire, and every step I took was silent applause. She vanished for a while after the party, like a ghost embarrassed to haunt the place it once called home. Word spread faster than wildfire, not just in her family, but in the wider circles she used to orbit with pride, her Pilates group, her alumni brunch club. The women's business collective she once posted about with hashtags like #empowered and #bossenergy. They all dropped her. One by one. Silent unfollows. Group chats that stopped responding. The yoga studio removed her profile from the website without announcement. Her firm didn't fire her outright. They just stopped giving her projects, froze her out, and made sure she understood it would be best for both parties if she resigned. No scandal. Just a quiet erasure. She moved out of the condo we once shared and into a bland apartment complex across town, the kind with gray carpets and cracked mailboxes and neighbors who mind their business because they've got their own mess to clean up. The affair partner? Gone. The moment her name carried more whispers than warmth, he blocked her on everything. Ghosted her so completely, she once showed up at his office, pathetically in the rain. I know because a friend of mine happened to witness the scene from a nearby cafe. She was screaming into her phone on the sidewalk, soaked through, demanding answers from someone who had long since answered by disappearing. The same woman who once wore red to command a room now wore oversized sweaters to disappear into them. She started showing up at my gym, not to work out, just to hover, to see me. Sometimes she'd sit in the parking lot, hoping I'd walk by, hoping I'd say something. I never did. Then came the messages. I miss you. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I still love you. I didn't block her. I let her speak into the void. Because I knew that silence would echo louder than any response. But she wasn't done. Not yet. One night, weeks later, I heard a knock on my door. I knew it was her before I even looked through the peephole. She stood there on my porch, no makeup, hair tied back, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept in days. She clutched something to her chest, a framed photo of us, the one we used to keep in the hallway. Please, she said, voice already trembling. I don't want to fight. I need you to see me. Not who I became. Just me. I opened the door. Not wide. Just enough. She took a shaky step forward, like a dog testing if it'll get hit again. I lost everything, she whispered. And maybe I deserve it. But I didn't think I'd lose you. She held the photo out like an offering, as if I'd take it, place it back on some metaphorical mantle, pretend the fire never touched it. You were right, she said, tears running now. I built a house in someone else's bed. And I burned the map. But I'm standing here, begging for you to draw me a new one. I looked at her then, really looked. And what I saw wasn't my wife. It wasn't even the shadow of her. It was a stranger wearing the skin of a memory I no longer believed in. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just said, I don't even recognize your voice anymore. And I closed the door, locked it, turned off the porch light, and never opened it to her again. Thank you for listening to my story. Where are you from? And did you enjoy the ride?